The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman and Tony Kurre.
It is indeed a Thursday afternoon edition of Mission Minded here on 101.1 The Truth, 941-1011. Let's start by bowing our heads. Lord, we thank you so much for this incredible day, another day of your light, your wisdom showering down on every move we make as we continue our discussion tonight on jobs and working and all the graduates coming out and getting ready to take on the workforce. Let us bask in your glory and the wonderful people that we meet every single day in our lives. So there are no coincidences, and every person you place in our life has a purpose. Help us put our best foot forward when we're meeting these new people. Let us be able to process your love and your will and profess that to everyone we meet. We pray that you put life-changing words in the mouth of Michael and myself tonight and give our listeners a show that you'll be proud of and worthy of your glory. Amen. Michael, How you doing, my friend? What's going on? I for the life of me, we had a show yesterday. It was one of those shows where I looked down. It was like 10 minutes till 6. I was like, it went by so fast, which are great. Those are great shows, man. We like to have a show like that every single night, and we're getting there. But it was fantastic. We were talking about seniors, and we were talking about people getting into the workforce, and it was just a fantastic show. If you get a chance to go podcast that, check that at TKR or wherever you get your favorite podcast. Is available through Mission Minded. And also, of course, you can go to the website for 101.1 or also missionminderradio@gmail.com. Info at TonyKurreRadio.net. There's all kinds of different ways you can hear us, but just pull up Mission Minded. You can see all of our shows. But I was sitting there and I said, and I threw a question at you last night, about 3 minutes till, and I said, man, that's not fair. I just threw you a big question. I said, well, let's be perfect. We can pick this up tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. And for the life of me, I can never remember what we were talking about. But that's okay. We still have some powder left here for the second hour of this discussion, because tonight we're not only talking about the youngsters getting back in the workforce, but for some older folks who perhaps hopefully they get into the workforce because they want to, but in some cases they actually have to. We'll talk about that. But first of all, how are you, my friend? How was your day?
I've had a good day. We have our I'm part of a Sunrise Rotary Club here in Montgomery, and we have just a super club, and we're called the Fun Club. We have a really great time. It's almost like one big family, and we're very close to one another. And so we're able to give out about $20,000 a year.
Nice.
For grants, and what we try to focus on is not the larger nonprofits, but the smaller ones, the ones who typically don't have access to larger grants or don't have access to as many community grants because they're small, but they're doing impactful things. Sometimes just in a neighborhood, but really important, impactful things. So this year we're actually giving away $25,000, but we have our big fundraiser this time of year, and it's a shrimp boil. And it's going to be downtown Montgomery at the train station, and really excited about that. But everything I was doing today was all wrapped up in that and getting ready for that. I'm the incoming president starting in July, and I'm excited about that.
Nice. And
honored to be able to lead the club for a year. There's been many, many great men and women who have gone before me, but I'm excited about the opportunity to try to further impact our community. And so, I was really wrapped up in that. It's a busy time of year every time we do this, but it's where we get the bulk of our money from to be able to every year distribute grants. So whatever we raise, we've already distributed $25,000 this year.
It's called the Fun Club. Could we have not gotten out there a little bit? I mean, do we have to have a meeting to call ourselves the Fun Club? That sounds pretty basic. I mean, I know you.
Let me tell you something.
You didn't come up with that.
No, it does sound basic, but let me tell you why. I've been to a lot of, first of all, I love Rotary. Mm-hmm. I know there's people, the major clubs. You have the Kiwanis, and you have the Lions Club and Civitan Club, and there's all sorts of. But I love Rotary. I love its mission. I love the camaraderie. But having said all that, one of the challenges of all of us is kind of breaking away from that. I just refer to it as the stuffed shirt civic club, where you go in, you get your meal, whether it's breakfast, whether it's lunch, you sit down in the same place you always do, you have a speaker comes in. Our club isn't like that. Our club is we razz on each other, we laugh the whole time. We do serious. We do serious things. We have serious speakers who come in. I think I mentioned yesterday on the show that Chancellor of Auburn University of Montgomery came and spoke to us. So we have very serious, but we actually enjoy getting up early and going and having breakfast together as a club. And we're just very close, and we pray together. We pray for each other's family members. And but it's genuinely fun to be a part of that. And let's be honest, a lot of civic clubs, I would even say most civic clubs can't say that. So we have I don't take it for granted because we're in a very, very special group that we love each other. I get it, the fun club. That's the fun club. But it's also very true and very descriptive compared to lots of times what's out there with other groups.
That's great. I'm sure it's better than the Grand Poobahs or something like that that maybe Fred Flintstone and I were in. Hey, before we jump into our topic, I was on Fox 6 this morning with Josh Claypo.
How's he doing?
He's doing fantastic. He's had some medical issues this week, so he's got a little bit of a soft stomach when it comes to procedures, and so normally when he has something done, something happens. But he's fine. He's good.
Yeah.
But for the first time since we've kept records, it is now costing over $300,000 to raise a child. From the time a child's born to the time that child turns 18, it's $307,893. Which comes out somewhere between, say, $15,000 to $18,000 a year. And the question to us was, is that something that couples? We were talking yesterday about getting jobs and getting married and starting families, and a lot of people they fall in love and they we've been together for a couple of years, they get married, they don't really think about are we going to have children first? Are we going to wait and see if we're going to make some money first and then build a house first, or do we just want to jump right into it? And in most cases, at least in my case, there's normally a pregnancy that happens on your honeymoon. If you're doing it right, you're not getting pregnant before you're getting married. And so, but just actually sit down and go, okay, listen, it's going to cost us about as much as it would to buy a house. Are we ready for this? Are we ready? I'm making $42,000 a year. You're making $37,000 a year. Can we actually afford an $18,000 baby? And so I lean back on the Bible, which I always do. I went to Genesis 1:28. I said, now, Josh, I said, God bless them. And said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. And he's like, oh, here we go. Here comes the Bible, boy. And I said, well, I'm just telling you, the Bible says, be fruitful and multiply. And I said, it is funny how things seem to work out. Now, I'm not one of these guys that believes that if you are like in the poverty line and you have 6 kids, that it's good to go have more. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that when a woman and a man want a child, and it's part of that progression of love that you have when you get married, usually she's ready to go. Those maternal instincts start pumping in, and man, when a woman wants a baby, she's gonna have a baby. I mean, it's more than anything. You don't think, well, this is gonna cost me $3,000. I said, this is not like BOGO. If kids were only $10,000 a year, you don't get buy one get one free. But you also don't sit down and go, okay, you want to have 4 children. That's going to be $1.2 million. How are we going to pay for this? You don't think about those things when you're brand new newlyweds, because God's going to bless you and things are going to work out. They just do. They just do. There's a lot of people out there, and I mean, we'll go back to something that is super hot, around this country is abortion. A lot of people say, well, I can't afford to have this child. And that is one of those situations where you ask a lot of people that have gone through that process and they wish they never did, because there is a way. God has a way to make things work. He will figure things out through his blessings. And so, what's your thoughts on that? Because I don't think we even think about. I didn't. I mean, I certainly didn't put a price tag on what, and I brought it up because, I've got a 14-year-old. My daughter has turned 14 this past Sunday, and I'd spend $50 million to have another one of her. She's the best thing that ever happened in my life. But we don't look at it from that standpoint, because this is part of our progression. You're in love and you want to start a family, and you do. Now, maybe after 2 or 3, things get a little tight. You think, you know what, we wanted to have 4. Maybe we could rethink this. Or maybe we were going to adopt. In our position, we wanted to adopt a child and then have a biological child. We tried repeatedly. We kept having a miscarriage after miscarriage. It just killed me for my wife. I hated that she was going through all that. And I said, well, maybe he wants us to adopt a child first. And so we adopted a child. Well, after a couple more miscarriages, I said, maybe the good Lord wants us to adopt another one. And so we adopted another child. And that was certainly a cost that we were not planning on. And that ended up being our special needs child, which is one of the most incredible things that ever happened to us. And then at the age of 46, God threw us threw his sense of humor at us and said, here, I'm going to get her pregnant now, thinking that there was no way we were actually going to have a biological child of our own. And so we were blessed to have both. But,
Sure.
At that time we didn't think to ourselves, gee, can we afford to do this? You make love to your wife and you hope for the best is what you do. So, but what's your thoughts on that a little bit? Because I think it's really interesting. Because a lot of people, you're coming out, like we mentioned, people are coming out of college right now, and unless you have a girlfriend or you're already married, you're probably not thinking about the married life. You're thinking about getting after it, making as much money as you possibly can, and maybe settling in. But maybe that is something that more people should have a discussion about. I don't know.
Well, statistically, I do know that people are waiting longer and longer. And of course, everybody has to reach that time that's best for them. I will tell you, first of all, anytime somebody throws some statistics out at me, whether they benefit my feelings or argument, or validate, I should say, my argument, or whether they push back against my beliefs or argument, we always should get these statistics and say, okay, let's examine how that was calculated. Mm-hmm. To understand what they're saying is, because you got to understand, here we are in Alabama, and they also have to survey people in San Francisco and New York, some of the most expensive places to live. And so when they do a nationwide, when they're doing something, they're probably getting the average or the mean of what it takes to raise a child, and probably in Alabama, because our cost of living is much lower than those places, I would say we are underneath. I mean, we're at more towards the bottom of cost. I'll also tell you there are things that I'd like to look in there that when they say, here are the things that typically you have to buy outside of food, outside of clothing, outside. And, they may throw all sorts of things in there that are really kind of elective if you're, so it may not be an annual trip every year to Disney World. I just had a friend who came back. I went to Disney. I've been to Disney World twice in my life. I took my kids one time. Of course, I was in the military moving around. And one time we went to Disney World with the kids. And it was outrageously expensive back then. And now, I mean, you want to talk, you almost have to take out a personal loan to take, 2 or 3 kids to Disney for a week. So I would have to look at that. But the reality is most people don't make decisions over time because if you think about it, when I got married and we had a kid, started walking through life, I didn't start parsing out, it costs this much to feed my family, it costs this much, and then I go, my kids are eating that. it's like once you start building a life, there's these things that kind of go together, and you start working somewhere. And lots of times we talked about, you start on the bottom and you work, and you have to make choices. One of the things that we've mentioned is a lot of people right away get so far in debt because they don't either choose to effectively manage their money, or they don't know how. And so lots of times they get into debt, and then when you get into debt and you have penalty fees, you don't pay your credit card, you get late fees, all that kind of stuff, all of that can really burden people, who are really struggling. But I remember I just had the first 12 years of my life, we talked about this. I was in the military. I was the only one making money while my wife stayed home with the kids. Mm-hmm. And look, I had to tell them no, and I had to tell myself no. It was really tough to make it on an enlisted salary for all of that time.
I bet it was, yeah.
But it was all. But never once did it ever enter my mind that, I wish I didn't have the kids.
Can I take this one back?
Your kids are worth every bit of sacrifice
absolutely
that you can.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if we're not perpetuating the species, if humans stop procreating, that's not good.
Well, you look at China right now and what they're going through. I mean, because they had the one child and that was it for years, and now they're actually paying people to have children because they don't have enough young people to take over their workforce.
I think Japan's and China's fixing to hit a real older a problem with age, but Japan's very much the same way. Japan, I think, was rated at what I saw was the fewest amount. So you have the death rate, and so for every death you have to have, don't hold me to this, it's like 1.5 births to be able to grow your population. Maybe it's even higher than that, and they're upside down on that. They have more deaths than they do births, and over time it can have an impact, like just being able to have the manpower to be able to defend yourself militarily. There's just all sorts of challenges, and when a country gets older, young people are not, in the military, you become vulnerable on the world stage, even more so now than you've ever been.
Yeah, that's true.
Because people, it's easy to know the aging populations of nations. That kind of stuff it's very hard to hide if you're a country. It's very hard to hide your vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Also, a little bit of news that came through PetSmart yesterday. I was doing a show, one of my many podcasts, The Dark Side of the Pooch, is a veterinarian show with Rossbridge Animal Hospital's Dr. Rab Stewart. For the first time, it's now costing over $5,000 a year to have a pet, to have a dog. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, you don't really break that. Now, that's more of a, listen, that's a little easier to look at because, you've got an animal that's not going to be around, obviously, for an entire lifetime. It's usually coming for a child. So that's something. But, I've had plenty of conversation with Dr. Josh. He said, you know what, if you're not sure if you're ready to have children, have a dog first. Have a dog first. If you can't afford a dog, your chances are you ain't going to be able to afford a child. If you're not the one that wants to get out of bed at 2:00 in the morning to let the barking thing out, then chances are you ain't going to be the one to get out of bed at 3:00 in the morning and feed your newborn. So just some thoughts. You maybe want to start off with a cat, or maybe a hamster or something like that, and then maybe you can move up to having an actual child or something. just a thought process. Yeah. This is Mission Mind. Keep in mind your mission your mind. 941-1011, 941-1011, 941-1011. We were talking about business etiquette. Dallas Teague, by the way, she's an expert in business etiquette. She's also a life coach. She's a minister. She's going to join the show as a special guest tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Looking forward to having her on the show. But we were talking about, some of the things that you can do give yourself a better shot at maybe landing that big job when you're coming out of college. Since I think Alabama's last day of school, I think, is next Friday. I know my son's Clemson is May 1st. I think Auburn gets out about the same time. So you're going to have all these class of kids coming into the workforce looking for their next jobs, and it's going to be something else. Before we get into the elder part of our workforce and whether they should work or not, did want to throw out the what were you when I was 18? My mom and dad weren't like get out of the house. I know some people are, but I left I think a lot earlier than my mom and dad wanted me to, and I explained that story where I got the phone call, and next thing you know, I'm moving down to Birmingham, Alabama at the age of 20. I think I probably could have stayed at home for a while, but everyone in our family, including my two brothers and sisters, we all left when we were 18, 19, 20 years old, got our own places and started working. But you do have now a new generation of youngsters who, quite frankly, just can't afford a house. And I can speak for it. There's people that are my age who can't afford a house right now either. I mean, it's like if you've got a house, hold on to it, because when you get out, it's really hard to get back into it. But you got some kids that perhaps want to stay at home for a little bit. As a papa, as a parent, talk a little bit about how you can set up boundaries. Yes, that's fine. Do you give them a date they need to be out by? Do they need to pay rent? Do they need to pay for their own food? Talk about how Papa Coleman would deal with a child getting out of college and says, hey, listen, Dad, I want to stay home for a few more years, or I want to save some money so I can start my own nest egg. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I've seen people do that. I've seen them do it really well. And I think the ones who don't, and I will, first of all, let me just tell you something when it comes to talking about my kids versus other people's kids. I might give you the best advice in the world about what you should do about X, Y, and Z when it comes to your kid, because there's no emotional connection. Mm-hmm. And then they go, well, is that what you do with your kid? And I'm like, probably not, because I love my kid. I want to protect all those things. So I'll be the first to hold my hand up and say, I know what's right to do. Did I always do what was right? No. Did I cave to my two daughters at times? Absolutely. And so I'll be the first to say, whatever advice I'm telling you, especially if it's tough love or whatever, just know up front that I'm probably hypocritical about it versus what I actually did.
Sure.
But yeah, to me, the role of a parent is to prepare people, to prepare your children for the next phases in life. And so the ones that I've seen who are successful, regardless of intellect, are people who are taught the value of hard work, so they have a good work ethic. They recognize authority. They have very clear boundaries in their life, and very clear expectations about some things are acceptable, some things are not. And those are the values you want to pass on to them. Now, we all know teenagers push boundaries. We all know young adults push boundaries. That's what I'm talking about. But because I very much believe in the proverb of teach a child the way they should go, and in the end they will not depart from it. Now, that's not a promise. It's a proverb. It shows the wisdom. When you anchor a child in with certain belief systems and certain values, yes, they can stray for a whole host of reasons. But they always will have that with them, and lots of times that is the very thing that draws them back to a place of faith, to a place of sanity, to a place of, you know what, I've got to grow up, I've got to have a better foundation, and the foundation's already there. It's just a matter of them prioritizing that foundation. But so if you say, okay, if that's my purpose as a parent is to help somebody, then you go, okay. So I've seen it done different ways. I've seen some people go, okay, then I'm going to prepare you to know that when you move out, You're going to have to pay rent. You're going to have to pay utilities. You're going to have to pay food. You're going to have to pay all that. So I'm going to make you pay all those things here. Although I'm not going to make you pay at the same level that you would out there. So it's going to give you an opportunity to save money. And some people take advantage of that, and they start saving right away, and they are very wise in their spending. But then some people go, well, I'm still a teenager, and any money I have is mine, and so, I'm going to do my thing. Mm-hmm. And parents just kind of look the other way and let their children come and go as they want to. Even when the children make bad decisions, and they're like, hey, my insurance is due. They're like, all right, I'll cover you. Now this is me. Yeah. And this is the hypocrisy I was telling you about. I'll be like, I'd be mad, I'd fuss at them, but I go, all right, I'm going to pay it this time, but trust me, next time but that's not actually, I'm not doing my child a favor when I do that, because the insurance company is not going to go, you know what, we're going to cover you another 6 months. Don't worry about it. We're going to cover you this time. It's not preparing them for the harsh reality of life. And I think that's a parent's job. Now, I have seen extremes to where there's no compassion at all. There's no mercy. There's no there's no, hey, I made a mistake. Can you help me get started? I've seen people, but more times than not, you see parents who let kids sit around. They'll lay around on the couch during the daytime, and there's no requirement to hold on to a job. There's no requirement to pay your own bills. There's no requirement to pay your own food. And what you do is you enable a state of dependency. Mm-hmm. And where a child, this was famous a few years ago, where a kid, I don't know, was in his 30s, took his parents to court because they were forcing him to move out of his place, out of their place. And he just came right out and said it was his belief that they should take, they have the money, they should take care of him. And it was that whole failure to launch scenario. Mm-hmm. Now, again, there's so much gray area. There's so many different approaches.
Yeah, it depends on. It depends on.
That's right. It depends on the situation. Parent may come along and say, "You got this. I'm going to help you." But
sure, I'll
tell you what I did. And I'll tell you how I did with my kids' student loan stuff. I told them, I said, "Listen, if you choose to borrow money to help survive or whatever, if you graduate in 4 years from college." And you make good grades, then I will help you where I can repay your student loans. I'm not going to repay all of it, but I will help you repay some of it. I said, but if you go around and goof around and you don't finish your degree and you have to continue to get student loans, I'm not paying you a dime.
Sure.
So I put it on their shoulders as to how serious they were going to take school. I said, if you joke around and it takes you 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, I'm not going to help you repay that.
Yeah, hopefully, and hopefully you have a child that understands that. And usually, if you have a good work ethic and you have a good father and a good mother in the house, those kids will kind of realize that. They see how their mom and dad, from an ethics standpoint, pays their bills on time and does the right things and makes sure that everyone's provided for. But thank goodness we weren't in a situation where I think, like I said, I left early, and I think my mom and dad actually wanted me to stay because I was the baby in the family, and I was. Let's face it, I was the best. I was the best. I was a miracle baby. I wasn't supposed to even happen. So, but I think so. When I kind of split, sometimes I think it's. Sometimes I think it may be good for the marriage, too, of mom and dad, too, because they're not used to having an empty house after 18 or 19 years, and all of a sudden they're forced to look at each other again and pick up where they left off. So I think that could be interesting, too. All right, people getting older. Got a friend of mine. Her name is Mary. She's 70, 68, 69, 70 years old. And things were getting a little tight about 3 years ago. She's also got a husband who's a good friend of mine, was in the service for a period of time, and he was also retired. They seem to be doing okay for each other. They had a home and a dog, and they helped out, with their community and did some things around. But she decided that maybe it was time to go back to work because things were getting a little too tight. So she went back to work and she got a job at Publix. And Publix is great. We love them.
Sure.
My son works there. So she goes in there to get like a 10 to 15 hour job. And then next thing you know, she's talking about how wonderful it is. And then all of a sudden he decides, well, I want to go get a job. So he decides to go get a job. Now they don't work together, which is, they've been married for 40 something years. So he's like, I make sure that when she's off, I'm working, and when I'm working, she's off. And I'm like, that's fine. But what turned into a 10 or 15 hour a week just to kind of make ends meet thing turned into this full-time 35 to 40 hours a week now. She's become a manager. He's really on the cleanup crew. He doesn't really care about, doing stuff at the cash registers. He's like, he wants to keep to himself. He loves cleaning the parking lots and doing the bathrooms and everything else. He's just always been a cleaning kind of guy, and he's very, very happy. He kind of sticks to himself. But I bring this up because now it seems like all I'm hearing about is them complaining about how difficult work is and how much they're working, and all the drama that comes along with the workplace. And I said, whoa, back it up a little bit here. I thought we were doing this just to kind of help make ends meet. You said, it was getting difficult to buy some groceries. Everything was good. They were meeting the needs. But next thing you know, you're taking on more and more hours. And next thing you know, you got a bad hip, you got a bad knee, you're 72 years old, and you're working 40 hours a week. I'm not sure that's how that's supposed to go. So, yeah, you got to be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you ask for. But there are some people that need to get out there and get back to work. And if, in fact, you do that, try to find something you love to do, but also be cognizant of the fact that, your body's not getting any younger, for sure.
Yeah. I will tell you, I saw this when I was with the food bank. So often people coming in, I think I've told this story where this 84-year-old man with his 80-year-old wife goes into his first time he had ever stood in a food line because his medicine went from $750 a month to $1,200 a month. And I think they were both on, just Social Security. And so it wasn't enough money to buy groceries. And so people find themselves all the time for different reasons need to go back to work. Now, some people are like, money's not the issue. It's, I'm lonely at the house, or I want to feel a sense of purpose. So it's not always a money issue. One of the things that I found, though, is when you, because I've actually hired older workers before, and it's there's huge pluses and huge minuses. One of them that I have found is when you're the one hiring, I found oftentimes there's this age bias because the assumption is that they're less adaptable, they're slower. They're overqualified for what the position you're hiring them for, and so they're always going to be telling you how to make it better. Well, in my experience, not the slower is not my concern, the overqualified and all that. What I have found is that one of the major downsides is people who are less adaptable. But let me explain to you why that was a problem, because when I run an organization, we tend to run very fast, and we stay flexible because, if we're starting a new initiative and we realize, hey, this aspect of this isn't working, then we quickly shift and go and try this, and then if that's not working, we shift. So, we can change a process 3 or 4 times in a week, to be able to determine what's right. And what I have found is if you can find, and I have one particular gentleman in mind who came to me. He was a volunteer. He drove a forklift. He was moving stuff around. And I came to him and I was like, hey, just letting you know, we are going to install some shelves and this is how we're going to do it from now on. Well, that's not the way he had kind of created his own system. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't adapt. And so he started biting at people, acting out and all that.
Really?
And so I finally had to fire him. Now, but there's some wonderful things I've seen with people also, which is they bring this foundation of a work ethic. If they're going to do something, they may be a little bit slower, but they're going to do it to a good standard. They take pride in their work. Lots of times they are very attentive to detail. There is one of the other disadvantages that you see sometimes is there is a technology gap, not with everybody, but that certainly happens at times. But I will tell you, older people, even with some of the downsides that I've experienced, I'm still a huge fan of, because you get people typically that come in, they're going to be very loyal. If they're supposed to work, they're going to work. I hate your friends, but I'll share another example. I had a friend whose husband was partly disabled, and so he had been out of the workforce for a long time. Well, he started doing better with his back, and he went exactly to Publix as well. Well, when they saw that he could come in, I think he was working less than 20 hours a week, mm-hmm. but every time somebody called out, they would call him. And he's not somebody who says, no, I'm not going to come in. They feel, because they have a sense of ownership. The bad part is it did begin to overwork him, and they were working him 40 hours a week, and he said, that's not what I wanted to come back and work 20 hours a week. But he proved himself to be loyal. He'd answer the phone. He'd come in when you need him. And that's really a part of the generation, the boomer generation, loyal, hardworking, but sometimes can be a little set in their ways. And you have to find positions that they want to be in and kind of just let them go and kind of do it their way if you can. And but I think there's it saddens me that somebody has to get out and work at age 70. I will tell you this, since we're on, since our show is going out to a Christian-based audience, I was having the conversation the other day about pastors for many, many years. They would say, when you go for an interview, I had pastors tell me this when I told them that once I got out of the military, I'd like to go into pastoral ministry. And they said, well, listen, get used to this, because this is what you're going to hear, which is, how much do you have to have? How much do you and your family have to have, to come here? And let's say it's just a small town church, and you'd say, well, we're going to give you a house to live in, the parsonage. And you say, well, I've got to have, now this is a few. You're
talking about ago. In order to become a pastor at a church. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And so, you go in, they're like, yeah, we'll hire you. What do you got to have? And you're like, well, I got to have a minimum $30,000. And they go, okay, we'll pay you $30,000. No benefits, no anything else. Well, today you still have pastors who will fill in every chance they get. They're age 70, 75. It's because they were allowed to opt out of Social Security several years ago, but nobody gave them benefits. Nobody thought about a pastor, getting to a point and could have health issues and would need to be taken care of. Thankfully, all that dynamic's changing, is that most churches offer benefits and retirement and all those things, which I'm glad of. But it's really sad to see somebody standing in the pulpit because they don't know where their next few dollars are coming from.
Reminds me of movie 2015, The Intern. You remember that with Robert De Niro? Anne Hathaway. He's a 70-year-old widowed man, and he comes into. It was a good movie, but it was kind of a difficult movie for me to watch because it had the premise on it was cute and it was precious, and then he ended up kind of being a pain. He ended up kind of taking everyone's positions over at the workplace, but everyone loved to have the old man around because it was fun to have the intern around. But yeah, that was an interesting movie if you get a chance to watch that. But my dad kind of went through the same thing. He worked 40 years distributing newspapers, and I want to say he retired in his 60s, 63, 64 maybe. And we were just so happy that my dad had the opportunity to retire. I mean, he deserved it.
Sure.
He worked his tail off, throwing newspapers for 12 hours a day, and did it for almost 40 years by himself. And we really wanted him to be able to enjoy the better parts of life. Now, when my mom got sick and she went into the Alzheimer's wing of the nursing home, it was $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month or whatever, and all of a sudden my dad found himself hurting. I mean, I remember I was doing Meals on Wheels for him, and we were trying to help out, but he ended up having a good friend of his that owned a catering company down in Evendale, and Ohio, and he's like, hey, if you want to come down here and I'll put you to work. Come down here and work. So he ended up working 4 or 5 hours, maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and got paid under the table, and so he had a little extra spending cash. But he was making sandwiches. I don't know. It's weird now because if you're 60, 70 years old, you're old enough now that you're probably on the backside of the computer technology that everyone's going through. And so it's not like, you're going to learn how to use an email for the first time, or you're going to use, word processor or whatever, depending on what kind of job you're looking for. And now with AI, it's probably even more difficult, wouldn't you say, for older folks to find those jobs? I mean, they got to be skill jobs.
Well, and that's, if I were sitting down one-on-one with somebody who says I'm in that position, one of the very first things is, you could have somebody who was an executive level, and let's say for whatever reason, health reasons or whatever, he's had to use up his, the bulk of his retirement, and he or she says, I need to go back to work. That's an incredibly difficult thing of, hey, I was at an executive level. Now, it may have been I was at an executive level before all the automation came along, so I was good, I was effective, and so. But you can't step into that world anymore because you can't keep up without, knowing technology. So you have that. It can be a very humble thing to say, I've got to step back into this role, something that is much less than what I'm used to. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday. About anybody transition or. It was a couple days ago, when anybody transitioning into a new position, especially if you're used to either a leadership role or a significant public role, where, hey, my job comes with these things, and now you're repositioning yourself. This is really where it could be a struggle of faith to say, no, my identity is as an executive or X, Y, or Z. And then you're like, well, now I'm having to do this, and I really don't know how to respond to that because I'm used to being known as, somebody in a prestigious position.
We saw that a lot too in 2008. Because a lot of older people had their 401ks or their pensions into one thing. And they lost half their money that day. I'll never forget it. My dad told me exactly what he lost. And, when you're 68, 69 years old and you lose $200,000, that's a killer. And a lot of people lost that. And it wasn't like they had time to get it back. If you're like the normal person and you're putting money in every paycheck on a 401k, you're buying low, you're selling high, it all kind of averages out. And so you can take one of those hits and it doesn't kill you. But when all your savings is in one pot, all of a sudden half of it's gone in one day, it ain't coming back. That's a killer.
Well, yeah. And that's certainly the fear. I know like the stock market now is back, to getting close to its previous highs. And just over the history of time, the stock market recovers. Like we lost, I don't remember, 30% on the stock market when COVID hit. And then, just over time, the stock market works. But if you're in the moment, like you just said, and you're looking at that fall off, then what begins to happen? You're like, wait a minute, that's my safety net right there, and now I've lost half of it. And healthcare cost, as we get older, we encounter more and more healthcare needs, and the costs continue to rise. The medicine continues to rise, and the example I used before about, again, I have a lot of food bank stores because that's when lots of times you meet people. Two 60-year-old husband and wife came in. They were in their 60s. Well, they both had worked their whole life, and and all of a sudden now they're both out of a job because she had terminal cancer and needed full-time care. He couldn't afford full-time care, so he had to stay at home. So now they go from two full incomes to no full incomes, to no income, and there's nothing they could do. He had to stay at home and take care of her, and so they come to they came to a food pantry for assistance, and the whole point is sometimes you can prepare, you can plan, you can have a great work ethic, you can do everything right, and something still your life still unravels because of unforeseen events. And so what happens is there begins to be a real faith tension in that, because you're like, God, I trust you as my provider. I've always given as I should. I've helped other people. I tried to save money for the future. And now, I don't know how I'm going to be able to feed myself. And I'm losing my wife. And, this anxiety sets in. And I think we can all relate to that of how that would come in and say, where do I go from here? So these are not just job issues. These are not just, I'm older, I'm going to go back to work, I got to adapt, blah, blah, blah. These can drive people and their emotions and can affect their mental health to the point that sometimes people get in dark spots and they don't see any other way out, and they take those matters into their own hands. Yeah. And it's a real problem and a very serious one.
You see that a lot with vets. I see these signs. I love these signs, by the way. They're all over our neighborhood. I'm not sure why there's so much in our neighborhood, but it's a suicide or some type of mental helpline, and it said, "You're bigger than this moment." I love that. I just love that, because it strikes me. It says, are you feeling depressed, or you're not feeling good? You are bigger than this moment. In other words, this moment should not dictate what you should do at this point in time. You are bigger than this moment. There is help out there, and that is so important. And you're right, man. I mean, listen. Well, you read the Bible. Life ain't fair, man. It's not. We have to continue to live our lives like we want Jesus to want to live our lives. We have to live His will, and we have to remember that He promises to be sufficient. But we have a big part in that, and that is to be faithful. And in a perfect world, we work for 40, 45 years. We're tithing. We're doing all the right things. We've raised children. They're off doing their thing, this, that, and the other. And sometimes, man, it just hits the fan. And you're like, wow, that's not how I saw this. We want to go retire down to the beach and, die in our sleep. And I'm here to tell you, man, that ain't life, brother. It's just not that way. And you just have to trust that God has His plan in place for a reason, and you have to stay faithful. And I'll say this too. And I know a lot of my dad. It was funny. My dad would always pick up the tab. Okay, it didn't matter. I didn't care where we were at, what we were doing. My dad was going to take care of his kids. He was going to pick up the tab. My daughter, we were out shopping the other day. It was her birthday, and she had a couple $100 in her purse. I said, what are you doing? She's like, I'm going to buy some clothes. I said, you know, you're 13 years old. You turned 14 today. I said, you're not buying your own clothes. Oh, I'm not going to let you spend, first of all, she didn't need to be spending that kind of money on clothes. She's 13, 14 years old. She's growing like a weed. They're not going to be good next year. I said, but I'll take care of your clothes and things like that. You save that money. You put that money away. You know, it was one of those situations where, it's a lot of parents, you know, I remember the day my dad stopped paying. And I don't know if it was because I had gotten a raise, or I don't know if I had moved away or something, but all of a sudden the check wasn't going to the head of the table. And my dad expected us to take care of him. And we were more than happy to oblige. You know, that's when we started, you know, the four of us, we were fighting over the check. We had all, you know, done well. We've been blessed. We've all been blessed. And I'll never forget that moment where it was like, wow, Dad didn't pay for dinner tonight. And it's like, you know, maybe it's time for us to pick up a little bit. He raised us. You know, my mom has already passed away, but they raised us. They got us through 18 years or longer, depending on how long we lived there. And I think at the very least, you know, the kids need to be cognizant of, listen, you got to take care of your parents too. There's some Bible passages on that as well, that we take care of our older folks as they get a little older in life and get back.
That story reminded me of something, and it really has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But we're on the last 10 minutes of the show, so. Let me just share this because it really I think it's still an interesting dynamic. My son-in-law is about 38 years old, and when we go out to eat, I had that attitude. I'm going to pay. I don't want to argue with him. And he'd always say, "Here, let me pay." And my wife at the time, kept on saying, "No, you're not allowed to pay. You're not allowed to pay." And I remember that's exactly how my dad was. He would never let me pay, and so I quit asking. But I also remembered how that made me feel, like I had to be taken care of, and like it's a blessing to me when you get to pick up a check.
Yeah.
You can't always do it, but if you pick up a check for a friend or for a parent, you're not doing it because, and that's how my dad would take it, I don't need your money. Well, I'm not doing it because you need the money. I'm doing it because I want to show appreciation for this time. I want to do something nice for you, and this is something I could do nice for you. I'm not doing it because you need me to. I'm doing it because I love you and I care about you, and I want to express it in this way. Well, my dad's pride wouldn't allow me to do that. And so when I started down that same path, I remember having a long talk with my wife and saying, listen, next time he offers to pay the check, I'm going to allow him to do it. So don't interfere, don't argue, don't do anything. I said, because I'm really robbing him of the ability to express his appreciation.
Yeah.
It's a way that he can love back on us. And so if it's pride that's keeping us, we're going to set that aside, whatever it is, and understand it. And it was very hard to do at first. Now when we go out, I still pick up the check more than they do, but if he sometimes gets insistent, he goes, no, I really want to pay for tonight, I back away. I let him do it. And it still feels a little uncomfortable, but it's I don't want to deprive him of that blessing. And I would be doing that because it's my pride, my sinful attitude towards him. And, the truth of the matter is like a lot of people in the Gen Xers and boomers, they will pay for anybody's meal, but they feel real uncomfortable when you offer to pay their meal. As a matter of fact, I have a buddy, we're the same age, so he's just turning 60 this year as well. And we would go out to eat, and at the time, I wasn't making a ton of money. He knew what I was making. He was on my board at the nonprofit that I started, and I knew what he was making, and he was making maybe twice as much. And we'd go out to eat, and he'd always want to buy. And I said, "Stop." I said, "I'm going to pay for this meal." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't need you to." I said, "You're prideful." I said, "Right now, you know what I make, and I know what you make. But the only reason you're preventing me from paying for this is because you either feel sorry for me or, pity on me, or it's your pride." I said, "All that said, I don't need you to be. I want to express an appreciation to you for that." And he told me later, he said, "I never even looked at it as a pride issue." He said, but those things can sneak in so easily and interfere with something where somebody's trying to do something nice for you, and we feel, whether it's prepare a meal and bring it to you, or just do something really nice, pick up a check, we sometimes can really rob them of that blessing. Because if there's going to be somebody who gives, who gains blessings through giving, that means somebody's got to be on the receiving end of that.
You're right. And you don't want to rob them of that. And that just, we always talk about, as you get older in life, you just realize that we can't do this alone. We're here to help each other and love each other. And it's all over the Bible. You got to help each other and think outside yourself. And we're certainly living His will, but we've got to think outside ourselves and help our fellow man. And if we have issues, we have problems, and we're not asking for help, then we're robbing those friends of ours the opportunity to feel good about themselves. And I can't tell you how many times I've reached out to somebody or someone's reached out to me, and they're in a bad way, and it's made me feel so good that they thought to call me and ask me if I could help. I mean, I was like, thank you for, it was almost like they were doing me a favor by asking. And so that's super important to keep in mind. It's so good to hear you talk about your dad, and I could talk about my dad all night long.
Yeah.
And the things that I learned through him, and I'm still learning from him. He's been gone for 10 years, and I still remember things about him. And I still, despite the fact that he died of cancer, and I knew that if there's one silver lining to cancer, you don't have a lot of time, so you got to get after it, man. And it wasn't like we had a lot of things we needed to share anyway, because we loved each other, and he was my best friend. He's my best man at my wedding and everything. But there's still things that I look back on that I wish I had asked him, and I know one day I'll get that opportunity again. But there's things that I think there's nothing I could have asked him, but there's still some things, and particularly when you're talking about finances. Because my dad was really good with his finances, and he had to be. I'll never forget. He had about 1,200 people on his route, so he was delivering 1,200 newspapers, and occasionally he would get somebody that couldn't pay their bill, and we're talking, newspapers were 25 cents a piece or something like this. This is back in the 70s and 80s. And he would send them a bill, and it would get 60, 90 days, and he'd always keep throwing them a newspaper. And it was set up where the carrier had to buy the newspaper, and then they would sell the newspaper at whatever price that's how the business went. Then at one point, the entire Cincinnati Enquirer ended up buying all the papers, and that's when all the carriers lost their jobs and everything, and that's when it kind of turned in. But they all kind of worked for themselves. You could charge whatever you wanted for a newspaper. And I remember, him coming home with a big smile on his face, and occasionally someone would pay their bill with like a side of beef, or a brand new pair of bowling shoes or something like that. And my dad would go, well, you owe me $63 for the last 3 months. And then there was a guy that worked at, I think it was Kroger or something, worked back in the meat department. And I'll never forget, my dad would say, if you want to skip that bill and just bring a side of beef, boy, that nothing made my dad happier, man, when he could bring home a side of beef Man, we thought we were high on the hog back in those days. The Curry family had arrived when we had a full freezer full of steaks. We could eat steak as long as we wanted to. Man, we thought we had hit the high on the hog. So that's good stuff. Hey, great show, my man. Take the night off tomorrow night. I'm going to have Dallas Teague coming in and filling in.
I'm sure
so
it'll be great.
I want you to have a wonderful weekend. I love you, and make sure you check out Mission Mind. Tell your friends and family about our new show. Check us out. Keep in mind your mission in your mind, and have yourself a wonderful evening. God bless you, my friend.
God bless you.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.